Hey, it's Dave Brown here, host of Now with Dave Brown on AMI. Check out this latest highlight from the show. Veteran sportscaster Scott Russell will retire at the end of the summer after 40 years with CBC. Russell will step away following the upcoming Olympic and Paralympic Games in Paris. His final broadcast takes place September the 8th, and I am beyond pleased to welcome Scott onto the show right now. Hey, good morning, Scott. Wonderful to chat with you this morning.
Great to be here, Dave, to hear your voice, to see you in person. I know we had a connection a few years back, but great to see you again today.
Yeah, lovely. Anytime a chance to talk to you is one that I look forward to. I know this question can be a little bit complex because you're not quite stepping away yet. You still have a few months here on the docket, but why did you feel like now was the time to step away?
You know what, Dave? I've had a great run at CBC Sports. As you mentioned off the top, I've been here almost 40 years. Hard to believe, you know. And when you think about it, as you begin as a young broadcaster, you never think about the day that you're going to call retirement. But all of a sudden, it presents itself. Maybe it's time for some new challenges. I've seen a lot, had a great passion for sport. Worked Hockey Night in Canada and seen the Stanley Cup awarded, been to 16 Olympic Games. So maybe it's time for some new challenges. And the other thing that comes up is maybe it's time to spend a little bit more time with my family, kicking back and enjoying some things I'd like to do in life. I just think it's time, Dave.
It makes total sense to me, especially with all the time that you've spent on the road over the years. You talk about 16 different Olympic Games. That's a lot of air miles being picked up, let alone all the different national events that you cover or Paralympic events that you've covered as well. Scott, a couple times when you and I have met in person, it's been at Paralympic Gala events, Hall of Fame events, and you've been a staunch ally and supporter of the Paralympic movement for years now. What initially drew you to Paralympic sports?
I think it's because I was attracted to sport in particular. And, you know, I think I've always believed that there should be less emphasis on athletes with a disability and on athletes, pure and simple. Tremendous athletes. I think back to some of the athletes that I've covered in para sport. I think about Lauren Wollstonecroft, the great alpine skier who won all those medals at Vancouver 2010. I think about Chantal Petitclerc, who won 21 Paralympic medals, 14 of them gold, and lit up the Olympic Stadium, the Bird's Nest in Beijing, when she won 5 gold medals in racing on that track. Absolutely spectacular. Jeff Adams, who I encountered way back, a tremendous athlete. You know, there are so many that I can point to that have done so much for sport. And as I say, it's always been about the competition and less about that phrase, athletes with a disability.
And there's an evolution taking place here, especially in the way the sports are covered. I think they're starting to become more representative of what you just described, that people are understanding Paralympic athletes as elite athletes. These are athletes who give the dedication, put in the time, and even some of the resources are changing now too. The expectations and the drive are starting to align with resources as well. I didn't mean to over preamble that question, but how would you describe the way the movement has grown in your time covering it?
I think it's grown exponentially. You know, I referred to Beijing 2008. And I remember going to those Paralympic Games, and I was there with Rick Mercer of the Mercer Report, and This Hour Has 22 Minutes. Everybody knows Rick Mercer. And we were watching what was going on at the Bird's Nest. And before we got there, we thought, you know, I wonder how the Chinese people are going to receive the Paralympic Games. And then the response was overwhelming. We watched Stephanie Dixon of Canada compete in the water cube, and the crowds were enormous, and they were very, you know, vocal in supporting the Paralympic athletes. And then, as I mentioned, we saw Chantal Petitclerc race before a packed house at the Bird's Nest. And I think also what happened in 2012 in London was that the British broadcaster at those games in 2012 covered the Paralympic Games extensively and to the same extent that they covered the Olympic Games. It was on television for the same number of hours. They had a very slick production, and they treated it on the same level as they would have the Olympic Games. And I think that mindset really has taken hold, not only in Canada, but around the world. And one thing in Canada that's very important, and it's a breakthrough at these upcoming Paralympic Games. You know, we have for quite some time now in Canada rewarded Olympic athletes for medal production and rewarded them financially. So you win a medal and you get $10,000, $20,000, whatever it is. Well, now at these Paralympic Games, Canadian Paralympians will be rewarded financially on the same basis, at the same level as their Olympic counterparts. And that's a commitment to the fact that Paralympic athletes are athletes without an asterisk.
That is such a huge news development. And Scott, I assure you that every Paralympian that comes through these camera waves and Zoom links and studio room get asked that question because of how important it is, what an important milestone it represents for years and years of advocacy. Scott, I think there's some credit that belongs to you and your colleagues at CBC Sports as well, though, in terms of the platforming of the Paralympic Games. Certainly it started in 2008 and 2012, and you've been doing incredible Paralympic primetime broadcasts for years and years. But now with the advent of CBC Gem as well, the platforming of all the different events, it just makes it so much easier to follow along with the games from an audience perspective. But that has to be a credit to you and your colleagues for actively doing that platforming for years and years and years to build to that critical mass.
Yeah, and I think it's a point of pride at CBC because we are Canada's Olympic and Paralympic broadcaster, and we take great pains to make that clear. And I think you mentioned, Dave, that we cover para athletes not just at games time, but throughout the year. And so, we went to the trials, and the Canadian Olympic and Paralympic swimming trials took place at the same time at the Toronto Pan Am Sports Centre. We covered them wall to wall. So Britt McLean and Devin Haru were down there, and we broadcast that on a nightly basis on GEM, as you suggest. We also cover the Canadian Olympic and Paralympic track and field trials, which just took place at Claude Robillard in Montreal. And, so we saw Nate Reich and others, Jesse Zizou in para sport, get their tickets to the games in Paris. I think it's consistent, and it's always been a message that I've subscribed to, which is we'll never meet a champion for the first time at the top of the podium, but we'll endeavor to know their journey every step of the way and to what got them to that great moment in their careers. I think that's a point of pride for us at CBC.
I love that you gave Britt and Devin a little bit of love there too, because they've become tremendous sports reporters in general, but they've really become incredibly strong on the Paralympic beat as well. Once again, it's testament. I know it sounds like I'm kind of blowing smoke up you there, but I mean it. It's totally true that there's been a dedication here with incredible people who've taken up the mantle. So even as you're preparing to step away, you're leaving it in really excellent hands.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think we have, a tremendously talented group of people at CBC Sports. And, the business has evolved. We're into the digital realm now pretty heavily, Dave, as you know. And we have young, talented people, energetic people who really know how to operate all of the platforms that are available to us in our business, and to disseminate the information about these athletes. And I think that's really hopeful going forward.
Scott, I want to come back to you heading towards Paris in a couple of weeks here. I imagine it must be a little bit surreal going into a games knowing they're your last ones, especially after the last couple of games being so strange during the pandemic. I'm curious what your own expectations are heading into the Olympics and Paralympics and how you feel you're going to experience this. I know it's weird to try and put that into the crystal ball, but I'm curious what you're looking ahead to.
What I'm looking forward to, Dave, more than anything, is a return to normalcy, if anything can be normal about the Olympic and Paralympic spectacle. But we're going to be on site, and I'm going to be on site, and I'm very thankful for that. I'm really looking forward to the return of the grandiose spectacle. And by that, I mean, we're going to have all of the spectators that make the Olympics and Paralympics what they are, the families that are going to be there, the people from around the world that will be there to see what these extraordinary athletes are capable of. I mean, that's what the games are all about, bringing the world together into one place at one time, people of every race, faith, gender, orientation, and ability to see what is humanly possible. And that's the sort of real crux of the Olympic and Paralympic Games. It only comes around once every 4 years, winter and summer alternating, but it is the world's greatest spectacle, and it is an enduring spectacle. And I'm just so happy to be there and to see the return of the fans and of all of the supporters of these tremendous athletes. I think it's going to be wonderful.
Yeah, it's going to feel like a real landmark in terms of that gradual return to normalcy that in a lot of ways has come back. But when you get the grandiose and big picture stuff, even when you're looking at the Copa America or the Euro going on right now, just to feel that energy coming through the speakers of the TV, and I can only imagine what it's going to be like to be on the ground. Scott, in the first hour of the show, reporter Megan Gilmore was on the show talking about changing habits in retirement and the existence of things like retirement coaches. I'm curious, as you're approaching retirement, do we need to set you up with one of those, or do you have your retirement map leveled out a little bit for yourself?
Hey, I'll tell you what, I can use all the help I can get. That's the thing about retirement. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day. He said, you know, nobody writes a book for you and tells you how to retire. You kind of get used to people doing things for you. Your paycheck comes automatically. You're told where to be to go to work at what particular time and what to do. So I'm gonna work those things out. But I'll tell you what, Dave, I know that I'll be busy. I certainly do want, as I said at the outset, to spend some more time with my family and to have some more leisure time to kick back and sit on the dock at the cottage sometimes, maybe do some traveling. But, you know, I'm also going to be the chancellor at Nipissing University in North Bay, Ontario. I'm committed to education. I'm a former high school teacher, and I'm really looking forward to being involved with that young and growing university, which has a tremendous school of nursing, school of education, and does some wonderful work in research into the environment. So I'm looking forward to that challenge. You know, you never know. I might still call some ski races here at CBC. Love alpine skiing. There's lots to do there. I'm an honorary board member of the Paralympic Foundation of Canada, along with Chantal Petitclerc, Rick Hansen, and Wayne Gretzky. So I'm looking forward to my involvement there. And I also am on the board of the International Center for Olympic Studies at Western University in London. So, Dave, I've got some retirement plans. Don't worry about me. I am not going away completely.
Scott, your retirement sounds busier than my average workday. So I think that's once again a testament to all the incredible work you've done. But that allows me to gush for 1 second on the way out the door here. Scott, you have been a fixture in Canadian sports broadcasting for 4 decades. Your professionalism on air is unmatched. Your charisma is incredible. The way you've supported athletes is amazing. And you've inspired a lot of broadcasters along the way, including the guy sitting right here at this desk. I'm going to share a story really quick About 10 years ago when I was working at CBC, I was doing traffic reporting in the morning and started dabbling a little bit with sports. And they said, you know, Dave, why don't we set you up for a quick call with Scott Russell and maybe he can give you some pointers on how to be great at this. And I probably never achieved the level of greatness, but I still remember that day talking on the phone with you for, I think it was supposed to be a 10-minute call, and I think we chatted for 30 or 40 minutes. And it meant so much to me as a young broadcaster that Scott Russell, the best in the business, would take that time to talk to some jabroni in Ottawa. It means a lot. And I know that you've passed it down and passed it forward to a lot of aspiring broadcasters over the years. So I want to personally thank you for that. And I want to encourage you to continue to do that. Like you said, you're going to be deeply involved in retirement. You have been a tour de force in this industry for 40 years, and your contributions will not be forgotten.
Dave, I really appreciate you saying that. I remember the conversation we had that was a number of years ago. It was great. I'm glad you're still in the business and doing such a wonderful job. And, you know, one thing that I've always kept really close to heart whenever I've approached this, and particularly in sports broadcasting, you know, it's been a great journey. It's not about me. It's not about you. It's not about the broadcaster. It's about the athletes that we tell the stories of and what they mean to their communities and what they mean to the country. You know, sport is such a huge part of our culture in Canada. And I think it's been wonderful to be able to reflect that coast to coast to coast in this country to so many people.
Scott, thank you for this. Congratulations on a wonderful career that is not over yet. I cannot wait to see you covering the Olympics in a couple of weeks and the Paralympics a couple of weeks after that. All the best to you.
Thanks very much, Dave. Have a great day.
That is Scott Russell. Scott is going to be stepping away and retiring following the Olympic Games and Paralympic Games in Paris. His final broadcast will take place on September the 8th, and I am beyond delighted that I got a chance to talk to Scott today before he probably packs those bags and heads out to Paris. Do you want to dive into more conversations like this? Watch Now with Dave Brown weekdays at 9 a.m. Eastern on AMI TV or download the podcasts wherever you listen.